Joining us today is Gaylene Preston, who needs no introduction, but let's give her one anyway. She is an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit. Fabulous. She also is the first New Zealander to ever receive the laureate from the New Zealand Arts Foundation, and that's just because she's an awesome filmmaker, storyteller, and celebrated in this country and overseas. How many film festivals have seen Gaylene Preston's work?
Gaylene, you won.
Panels are always difficult, but I like the panel. There's one opening panel at the Scripter screen. I had the privilege of chairing it last year, moderating, and I thought the least I could do was agree to be on it this year.
So you could give back. When you're moderating something like that, it's really hard to keep them under control. What were they like last year? Were they lippy?
No, they were more in control
Than you were this year?
Than Russell was allowed to be this year. We gave him a run for his money. I think the thing is that when I moderated, I basically thought it was really good for each person to speak their truth around the subject, one by one, and then there was an opening.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Did you follow those rules this year?
No. No, it was open slather.
So this year you were talking, I suppose, about why our films should be important to us and why they matter. Was there any interesting kōrero from your colleagues and peers and from you?
I think there are some things that we've been talking about for a long time that emerged from that discussion that I think are fresh ideas to think about, which is where the large screen symposium really goes out of its way to try and do that. We talked about the difference between Māori and Pacifica themed made films and how well they are received, not just internationally where there's an obvious sort of point of difference in the market, but at home, and the fact that Māori and Pacifica people go to see their films in large numbers. They like to see themselves on film, they celebrate it, they laugh, they cry, they go. Whereas the Kiwi cultural cringe on the Pākehā side is alive and well. And I think it's been really refreshing for me to be in a public space where that's been openly discussed, because there are sensitivities around that issue that have made it sometimes difficult.
What's our key is because the Kiwi culture was only bombarded with overseas merchandise to start with, and we had like a different bar set for us and expectations.
Got it in one. I called it the KKK, the Kiwi cultural cringe. And until we solve it, I think it, in my mind, it sort of links to the way that the political and official attitude to the telling of New Zealand stories has actually resulted in over 100 million of New Zealand taxpayer money going towards international product, and yet there's only 10 million per year for the telling of New Zealand tales.
Our own stories.
So, I think the KKK goes right through the culture. Someone like me, I saw my first New Zealand film when I was 29, and that was Sleeping Dogs. I was at the premiere. So I grew up in a world where there wasn't.
And that's unheard of for our teenagers. You wouldn't expect a teenager to see, well, in terms of their movie now, they would have seen their first movie while they were in the pram being dragged along with their mothers, but their first New Zealand movie, they'd be much younger now, but not necessarily really as exposed to New Zealand stories.
That's right.
One of the things that always got me for New Zealand stories was that I think when Kiwi New Zealand is able to openly celebrate Kiwiness, how Māori openly celebrate their tikanga Māori, maybe that will balance the books a little bit.
Yeah. And
so that's why these symposiums are really important.
That's right. And I was talking to Quentin afterwards, and he was saying, well, the reason that I make my films is I might be making films, or I could be doing other things, but all of my kaupapa is about Māori development. You know. And I was reading a thing the other day about really successful, long-lasting companies in the world, and what the difference is between the long-lasting companies and the ones that come and go. And the difference is that the long-lasting companies don't just know what they're doing, they don't just know how they're doing it, they know why they're doing it. So Apple, we want to change your world. That's why they're doing it. Well, I think that Māori filmmakers know why they're doing it, and I think for me, part of the reason why my company has lasted as long as it has, because, you know, GPP was set up in 1978, and it's still, touch wood, working away. It's because it's got a why, a clear why. You know, my why is because I grew up in a world that didn't have my culture around me, and I want to see New Zealand women's stories told, particularly, and I want to see truthful Kiwi stories told in the mainstream, you know, to a mainstream audience in New Zealand. So if we explore the why, I think we might find the answer to some of the questions we're asking ourselves at this conference.
In the back of my mind sometimes as a kid I used to think our stories wouldn't be important to anybody else because, you know, we make ourselves smaller, it's just us, you know, it's like family. And then you have to grow up a little bit and you can see that, well, if that person's story from that place over there, so far away with their little group of people, managed to end up on a great big screen, obviously there are some stories that are really important regardless of where you are, and especially because of where and who you are.
New Zealand, Aotearoa, is a landscape that is beautiful.
We forget that,
and
though.
Our landscape is made even more beautiful by the fantastic stories that come from it. There's a book a book of poetry by Alice Walker that says horses make a landscape more beautiful. Well, I think stories make a landscape more beautiful, and I mean stories from the place, not stories from somewhere else using that place as a location. Our stories are what make us. We are not a taciturn nation. We love to talk and we love to tell stories.
Yeah, we do.
Pākehā, Māori, Samoan, all of our peoples.
Well, I know I do.
Yeah.
I know the rest of my family doesn't talk quite as much as I do, which is why I do what I do. But stories and telling our own stories, sometimes we don't even realise we're doing them, doing that, until we have it pointed out that, hey, we're telling stories and we've got something worthwhile telling.
We have the gift of the gab.
We do. Is there anyone who isn't here this year? Because, you know, people like you who come along to, well, there is no one else like you, but the people who have been in the industry for such a long time and who have such a clear path, and I'm sure it's changed and ideas have changed through the years, is there anybody who you think you would like to see here next year who couldn't make it this time round? Someone you'd love to hear express ideas?
Jeff Murphy. Jeff Murphy is the producer-director of Utu, the original film made in 1982. It was the first New Zealand film that got into the official selection at the Cannes Film Festival. And I mean, it was actually in the competition. It has an interesting story. It kind of got lost. It's now found again. It's been put together by its original director, editor, and DOP, who produced the new version.
Redux.
The Redux. I call it the Deluxe Redux. The Utu Redux Deluxe edition. Anyway, I would recommend Jeffrey because I would love there to be more of me as I sit here now in 2013, and I would have been logically in 1983, when I was making the documentary, Making Utu, and when I then went on to make my first feature film, Mr. Wrong, in 1984, with Jeffrey and I writing some of it together, I would have thought that I could project myself into a future where there were lots of people like me who made New Zealand films and worked basically from home, travel the world, sure, but basically it's about us. And the fact that you can say, and you're right, that there is only one of me is a bit of a shame. Not to say that I haven't got filmmaker peers, but like Jeffrey, they had to leave home to continue to work. There's a whole raft of them. I kept losing peer groups for years.
Because there wasn't enough to keep them here.
Yeah, and I think that is an issue we haven't solved, and it relates to, if we don't have critical mass in terms of delivering a couple of $5 million films and 3 or 4 low budget films and a raft of documentaries into our cinemas every year, if that conversation always stops at around whether you liked the last one and should it have been funded, that conversation is constantly stopped. And I think that this forum is a place for it to actually proceed. It's about big thinking and trying to actually rise above what the daily problems are in our little filmmaker worlds as we struggle along.
That's what it feels like. It really does. It feels so small sometimes, and then it feels so big that you feel even smaller.
Oh no, and you feel alone.
Yep.
Everybody feels alone, and
at 5 a.m, when the juice is gone. Yep.
But you see, the thing is, the large screen symposium is an opportunity, because it's a script to screen initiative, to bring the creative heads, large and small, young and old, and the facilitating engineers, the producers, because it is producers that make films happen.
That's right.
And the hardest job you can have in New Zealand at the moment is to try and be a film producer, as you know. And it's a space where they can come together, and it's a pan industry discussion, and it's always interesting.
My beautiful friend Kath Brown said to me, "You must go, darling, because there are all of these like-minded people thinking like-minded things, and it'll be so inspiring for you, and it'll just remind you that you're not alone, dear."
That's right.
And there's somewhere to reach for our young filmmakers. When I say young, I think about my son. He's 15 now, and he wishes that he had a camera strapped to his hand, obviously paid for by mother. Instant gratification. But for people who see in pictures, hear stories over and over in their heads, what do we say to them? I sometimes say to them, "Don't do it." I want to go, "No, it's the long walk."
Well, it has been said to me by slightly older people in that generation, said, "Look, I really respect what you've done. I really recognise the work, but I have been privy to watching you do it over the last 15 years, and I'm not staying here pushing treacle uphill with a fork." I actually think that the question isn't what should we do for our young people, because I actually think that the New Zealand film industry, because of the hugely generous nature of the film technicians of New Zealand, has always been fantastic. New Zealanders, if you want to make your first short film, if you want to make and get it seen, and if you've got a modicum of talent and you want to get your first feature done as a low budget thing, you couldn't be in a better country than New Zealand.
We've got the tools to be able to do that.
That's right. So I don't think your 15-year-old's really got a problem. I think the problem comes when your 15-year-old is maybe 30.
I was just going to say, when he's got a mortgage.
And wants a family, and has made stunning short films that have gone to Cannes, and a good first feature that's a low budget feature that's had traction internationally. Our problem actually is that we get there pretty much through a triumphant kind of amateurism, and that isn't how to have an industry, because our industry is
It's
working.
not growth, is it?
The reason we've still got an industry is because they're actually employed delivering international product, and they're very good at it.
Yep.
So the question is, what do we do to have a sustainable industry so that when your son's 30, he can be waking up in a country where he can consider his next $5 million film and know that he doesn't have to stack it full of American stars or Australian stars or British stars.
To be picked up. The only other thing I would ask you today, well, there are two more things. I just want to know what movie you watched most recently.
I watched Fantail, the latest New Zealand feature film. I saw it at a packed house at the Paramount.
Oh, Paramount's is great.
Last night, with the filmmakers present. It's a triumphant piece of filmmaking, and I don't think the filmmakers have been paid. So that means it's not actually resourced to the extent where we have paid creatives. So unfortunately,
which again goes back to what you've been talking about.
Amateurism.
Yeah. Which
It's
is what
a very
your
good
whole
film.
argument's been.
I highly recommend you go to see it.
I shall now, because Gaylene told me to. And the last question, I suppose, would be, what's the one movie through time that you've watched the most that you go back to, that gets... Do you have one? Some people don't.
Well, I have a film. I have a film that I was privileged to watch make in 1982, and it's Utu. And that's the film I know, apart from my own films, because you watch your own films 50,000 times. The other film that I go back to is a film made by a couple of British filmmakers, and it's called Performance, and it stars Mick Jagger, and it was made by Donald Cammell and Nicholas Roeg in Paris and in London, using the Parisian style of filmmaking. And it has James Fox in it and Anita Pallenberg, and it's a real piece of great filmmaking. It shouldn't work, but it does. And it's called Performance, and that's probably the other film I've seen most, apart from The Wizard of Oz, of course.
Sometimes I think we were forced to watch that as children. I'm not sure.
No, The Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz scared me.
Ah, yeah, well, you see,
It doesn't anymore. I love it more now as an adult.
I didn't see it till I was in my 30s.
Oh, see, as an adult, I love it. I love it. I love what's not
scary
said as
for
much
kids.
as what's in it. But as a child, I just remember going, there's a scarecrow and it talks, man, and there's a lion and it's not eating each other. Thank you for your time. Where are you heading to after this?
I want to go to the next session.
Yes, go on then.
Which
We've
is
taken so much of your time.
A wonderful Mexican writer, director, who is giving...
Guillermo.
Yeah, he's doing a thing right now.
Right now, go on then.
Thank you.